Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This Day in Sports History. Hey, and welcome to This Day in Sports History. It's May 19th, and today we're talking hockey and a little motorsports, and maybe a few other things, but first hockey. And on this day in 1974, there wasn't just one hockey final, but two hockey finals. So let's start with the one that you probably haven't heard about, unless you are a hockey superfan. The World Hockey Association was wrapping up its second year. Just a little background on the WHA because I wasn't really familiar with it until I started reading Ed Willis's excellent book, Rebel League. So the WHA was to the NHL what the ABA was to the NBA, and in fact was started by the same people, but a league to rival the establishment with the hope of either becoming an autonomous league or, more realistically, a chance to merge with the big boys at some point. And side note, if you remember back to my episode when I talked about the formation of the ABA, I talked about how the guys who came up with the idea for a league were actually initially trying to get a football team up and running in the AFL, but the AFL-NFL merger happened before they could get it done. So they had all this money and they started looking around the sports landscape to see how they could use these funds that they had raised and said, we don't know anything about hockey, so let's start a basketball league. And yet that same group of guys came back a few years later, and they started a rival hockey league. And just like the ABA, it was like living life inside a tornado, teams moving to different towns, teams folding mid-year, a chaotic existence. And year two had been a wild year. There was a big push for WHA teams to make an instant splash, and the easiest way to do that was to throw huge amounts of money at NHL big names to see if they could get them to switch. Well, the Winnipeg Jets pulled off the biggest coup in year one, signing Bobby Hull to a $1 million contract. And in year two, it was the Houston Aeros who recruited all-time great Gordie Howe out of retirement to lace up the skates once again. Now, the lure from Houston was the chance to play with his two sons, Mark and Marty. He said yes, and so in 1973, the Houston Aeros signed Mark and Marty and gave Gordie a contract in June 1973. And even at the age of 45, Gordie showed he still had moves. In the first preseason game, Gordie scored 18 seconds after the puck drop. Now, he wasn't the fastest skater, but he was still physical and he could still score. And if Gordie went into a corner against another guy for the puck, well, Gordie was going to come out with it. He scored 31 goals and assisted 69 others, giving him 100 points for the season, which was third best in the league that year. He was named the league MVP that season too. The Aeros were the best team in the league as well, with 43 wins that year. So that leads us back to where we started. On this night, it was Game 4 of the Avco Cup between Houston and the Chicago Cougars. The Cougars had beaten the top two seeds in the East to get to the finals, but they ran into a buzzsaw in the first three games of the series against the Aeros. Using their potent scoring and great goaltending of Don McLeod, like they had all season, the Aeros won the game 6-2 to complete the four-game sweep to lift the Avco Cup in 1974. The Aeros would repeat as champs in 75, and one more humorous story from Ed Willis's Rebel League book. In the 1973 edition of the Avco Cup, with the final game set to be played, league officials realized, well, they didn't actually have a cup to award to the winner. So a person was dispatched to a local sporting goods store and picked up the cup for about $2. And seriously, if you're a hockey fan, buy Rebel League and read it. In no way am I being compensated for lauding this book. It is just that good. Okay. Well, on that same night in Philadelphia, it was Game 6 of the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs between the Flyers and the Boston Bruins. After dropping the first game of the series, the Flyers won the next three games behind Bernie Perron's excellent goaltending. They dropped Game 5 in a game marred by fights and penalties, but they still had an opportunity to close out the series at home. Perron was strong again in this one, turning away all 30 Bruins shots, including the potential game-tying goal with 3 minutes left. Ken Hodge unleashed a lasered slap shot, but Perron made an incredible kick save to deflect it away and keep the sheet clean. Rick McLeish scored the lone goal in the first period, and the Flyers became the first team from the 1967 expansion to win a Stanley Cup. Also, it was the first to win the Cup on home ice since the Bruins did it back in 1970. Perron was named Series MVP and given the Conn Smythe Trophy for his efforts in goal. The Flyers' first Cup win set off a huge celebration in Philadelphia, the likes that had not been seen since the announcement of the end of World War II. The Flyers would also repeat as Stanley Cup champs in '75. In 1991, race car driver Willy T. Ribbs became the first black driver to qualify for the Indianapolis 500. Ribbs was down to his last opportunity, and he was already out of engines. He came to the Brickyard with a shoestring budget of $350,000 in an effort to make the starting grid, but in the process of practice and other qualifying efforts, ended up blowing the 3 engines that they'd brought with them. Pleas were put out around the garage for a spare, and up until the second to last day, they didn't have one. As the final qualifying day, called Bump Day, dawned, though, another Buick engine race team offered Ribbs a spare. In the morning session, though, the team had more problems blowing the turbocharger. Another wild scramble in the garage found the replacement, and he was down to his final chance. He knew it was now or wait till next year or maybe never get another chance. When he hit the first turn on his qualifying lap, he found the speed he had been missing, and the engine held together. With a speed of 217.358 miles per hour, Ribbs qualified for the 1991 Indy 500 on the 10th row of the grid. Unfortunately, race day went a lot like his pre-Indy race went. His engine gave up the ghost on lap 9, and he finished 32nd out of 33. And time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? Have you noticed that most of your fast food company logos have the colors red or yellow in them? Market research has shown that the colors red and yellow are the ones that are most likely to make people hungry. That's all for today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.